Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Survivor 50 Wishlist podcast, an off-season series where we're determining who could and should come back for Survivor 50. My name is Mike Bloom, and you could argue today we might have too many cooks or not enough, as we are determining who from Survivor Cook Islands will be joining the shortlist on our way to Survivor 50, the upcoming returnee season. Now, of course, I am not alone here, and I am thrilled beyond belief to be joined by this person. Shortly ago, she underwent a life-changing event when she got wed, and she decided
Yes.
the first podcast to do after her wedding, for whatever reason, was talking about Survivor Cook Islands, but I will not judge because I can officially call her married, and it's the winner of Survivor 42, Maryanne Oketch.
So nice. Thank you for the introduction, Mike. And I want you to know you're the first person to actually use married and. So it took what is it? It's June. So that's like 3 months, April. No, 2 months, 2 months for someone to make that joke. So
oh my God.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, I'm going to say, the rest of the world's kind of slacking. Human
I
population.
know. But this is my first Survivor appearance, first podcast appearance, not the first podcast appearance of The Ring, though. I completely forgot it. I'm at my mom's place. So
I think you are honoring Candace Woodcock before she was Cody and going stag for the podcast.
Exactly, who are going to be talking about as well, too. So I'm very excited to go and talk about Cook Islands, one of the most diverse seasons of Survivor. Maybe the means wasn't the best, but the outcome was very great. We have some cool people and some people who I'd love to see on season 50. And this is not pre-gaming, people. So I don't want to see this on a segment in the future if it ever's going to happen. None of this poker line stuff.
Yeah, so even though Survivor Cook Islands ends up losing a lot of sponsors along the way, we're going to gain some people to put on the shortlist for this podcast. I mean, Maryanne, look, I gotta touch upon it because you mentioned it. And look, I did have Owen on the podcast for Pearl Islands, and I did push his feet to the fire for this as well. But if you were given the opportunity to go on season 50, would you take it? Because I was imagining for you, there might be some people, including a certain winner we'll talk about today, who was like, yeah, I kind of did what I wanted to do. I got my check. I don't necessarily need to do this again. Are you in that boat?
Oh my gosh. I think I'm now, if you ask me immediately after the season ended at 42, the itch was sated, but there's just something about going out and playing Survivor that seems so interesting and so fun, and the allure is there. But I think that if I were to go to 50, I'd have to be completely okay with being all-star Tina, where it's just like, let's just go kill the winners, whatever. So I think it just really depends on the mindset, where I am, and if I'm willing to go and have a great fun vacation in BG. So the answer is probably if the timing is right, but leaning yes.
Okay, which, listen, you know that you're a Survivor winner because that's like everything that nearly every person we've talked about in this podcast has said of like either yes, absolutely, or like, if the timing's right, if my schedule aligns, which doesn't mean no over the course of this. So yeah, we are going to dive into Survivor Cook Islands, which is a big season in Survivor history. Even outside of the almost increasingly controversial twist as the years go on of choosing to divide contestants by race. To your point, Maryanne, this was a pre-diversity initiative Survivor was putting in the works, no matter what the reasons may be behind it, of having a tribe of white people, a tribe of black people, a tribe of Asian Americans, and a tribe of Latinx contestants competing against each other for 2 episodes. And then we sort of like mix things together, but still does end up bearing out a little bit. But if we look at what this season is, even around that, it does sort of echo within the legacies of Survivor, even more than 15 years after the fact. Of course, yeah, you have the one of the greatest underdog stories in Survivor history with I-24, who overcome, I think, a 4-8 disadvantage.
I think so. I think you're right. 4-8 sounds right.
Yeah, after Jonathan and Candace mutiny. Of course, this is the first instance of the final 3 in Survivor history, which is something that still gets talked about to this day, but obviously was a giant game changer. It's the first, regular 20-person cast, I would say. Palau did have 20, but, they chopped 2 people off right at the beginning. So
you're right.
This was the first episode to enter episode 2 with 19 contestants, I should say, which is obviously a big deal considering that a lot of these modern seasons are going to contain 20 players. And perhaps most importantly, despite the fact that, again, we'll talk about this cast, maybe a bit top heavy in terms of standout characters, the top is certainly gleaming in terms of,
Oh my goodness,
yeah,
yes.
the fact that it's able to produce, a couple of out and out Survivor
Mhm.
legends, and not one but two 4-time players.
2? Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
Ozzy
Ozzy
and
and
Parvati.
Poverty. Yeah, that's so true. And we have, yeah, very, very, very top heavy cast. Very, very strong, strong, strong people. Very good cast. And it's great. And the great thing about Cook Islands is even though the way that they chose to make it diverse was questionable, they have very heavy hitters of people of all different walks of life and people from different races. So that's a plus.
Yeah, Maryanne, give me your thoughts on Survivor Cook Islands. Obviously, as
Yeah.
someone who especially came in, as we mentioned, in this new era, which does champion
Yes.
diversity in, I would say, maybe a bit less for-profit way, in a manner of
Yeah.
speaking. What are your thoughts, especially looking back on this type of season?
Oh my gosh. I think it's something which it's like you would only see that in the mid 2000s. Reality TV was like that's like when you get the most wild shows, where it's just like you had what Flavor of Love during that time.
Mhm.
You had like just like my like 500 pound like toddlers and tiaras, where you're just getting people just throwing things at the wall. And Survivor at this time didn't know, like, was still figuring out what type of show they are. They're like, we're casting people on the island, but are we more on like a little bit like summery, like backyardy sort of thing, or are we more on the serious like reality, like alone sort of place, right? So I think they were really trying to go and mix things up, be like, hey, we're America's diverse. How are we going to go and show that we're diverse? And they were at the place when they're just like, let's just cast people from different walks of life if we want a diverse cast. Like, no, we have to make it a thing. We have to make it a thing, and that's why we got split by like tribes of races, which not the best decision, especially if you think about how Survivor you bond with the people who you meet first, which is and you can't blame the what was it wasn't
It
I
was
do
Raro
Raro.
Tribe,
You can't
famously Candace from Raro
exactly.
Tribe.
You can't blame exactly. You can't blame Candace for wanting to mutiny to go to her OG people because it wasn't about race. It was about this is your original tribe. So I don't know how like after like a couple of seasons, 11, 12 seasons, they didn't see that this was going to happen. But it just seemed like there was foresight somewhere on the upper management level part, and then or someone said something and they shot it down because anyone could have seen that coming, especially if they were going to start with tribes for the first two tribals and split it up. I think that the intent was there, but the execution wasn't. And I think that overall, the outcome of still having a diverse cast, but almost, killing the show was pretty well fair. I think it was a fair judgment for what they did.
And it just even more kudos again to the I24 for what they were
Mm-hmm.
able to do between overcoming the deficit in challenges, between,
Mm-hmm.
what Yule is able to do in swapping over Jonathan,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Exactly.
obviously again that overall message, right, of like the fact that this kind of ragtag group of
Mm-hmm.
minorities were able to push through. Yule becomes the first Asian winner
Yep.
in Survivor
Yep.
history. And so it's interesting that no matter how or why the season was created, it does end up kind of producing this
Exactly.
incredibly diverse endgame and winner.
Yes, and the season was great. Everyone loves an underdog story, so people could root for that as well too. Like I know someone was like sweating buckets there and was
Oh
like,
my god.
thank goodness that we had the strongest 4 people on this tribe. Like I think it was great. I think that retroactively looking, Cook Islands was a good season, but whoever made the decisions just we were getting that stressed me out in the beginning, like just like and I didn't even watch it live. So that was
Mhm.
like so I was just like, "Oh my gosh, like who's going to win this? This is."
All right, well, let's talk about who won this and more.
Mhm.
We took the day off yesterday and I'm
Yep.
feeling bottled up with excitement. So let's open up that bottle.
Of
And we're
course.
not voting somebody else out tonight, luckily,
No.
Jenny. Instead, we
Yep.
are getting into our people here. And let's start with the first ever Final Three in Survivor
Yes.
history. So we've got the aforementioned Yule
You all.
alongside 4-time player Ozzy
Yep.
and Becky
Yep.
as well. So let's start with Yule, because Yule was someone who I think from a fan perspective was
Yep.
someone that people wanted to see for a long time. I think certainly
Mhm.
edited to be like one of the biggest brains to win
Mhm.
Survivor. We all know why elephants can't climb trees forevermore. And he did return for Winners at War, albeit, he did have sort of another reason to do so, which we'll get into a bit with another one
Mhm.
of his fellow Cook Islands castmates. And he does, like, I wouldn't say it was a complete fizzling out for Yul in
Mhm.
Winners at War. He obviously has a bit more of a low-key edit, but I think he has a bit more of a low-key personality compared
Yeah.
to all the wackadoos, lovingly so, he was surrounded with. He does nearly make the merge. He gets
Yep.
picked off right before it. I would love to talk about Yule in general. I will just say Yule was asked us a few years back if he would play again, and Yule replied on Reddit, quote, "I would consider it if there was a charity edition of Survivor where everyone is competing on
Mm.
behalf of a charity. Otherwise, I figure I'd probably get voted out immediately if I ever played again. Since everyone would know what I'd want to do with the prize money, I don't think they would let me get anywhere close to the final tribal council." So
Mhm.
that is to say, Maryanne, I think unfortunately that big schooner has
Yes.
sailed.
But if Yule's still following Survivor, he knows that Gabler did what Yule wanted to do. So
Mhm.
maybe now this means that like if people were playing that you would be willing to come back because he's like, I've seen someone do it before and like and then it's now actually happened. So and the door's not closed. The door has like a pinky in it, you know?
Oof, that
There's
sounds
a
incredibly painful for your pinky.
yeah, it's painful, but don't you need to suffer if you want something good to happen? Like
That's what I hear about the new era.
exact Survivor ain't fun. So going on a cruise is fun.
Yeah, so it's tough because
Yes.
Yule obviously came onto Winners at
Yep.
War, wanting to highlight Jonathan and the late Stacy
Yes.
title,
Yep.
highlighting ALS, and he said if he won, even when the prize money was doubled, he
Uh-huh.
was going to donate it all. To your earlier point
Yeah.
about Gabler. The thing about Gabler, though, and what Yule did the first time around was he was not going to reveal that to anybody.
Exactly.
So I think
Exactly.
what he's alluding to is, yes, maybe Gabler cleared the way, but if anything, that gives everyone more initiative to vote Yule out early and all-star Tina it, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah, I think yeah, it's really interesting, especially because as we've still seen the reason, especially on 46, we see that the reasons how people are going to use their money still matters to jury members.
Hmm.
So then it's like if Yule feels as if he has no win equity, then it doesn't make any sense for him to go in the end. So like I would love, I'm a Yule, I love Yule. Okay.
Yeah,
So
he's
I
great.
want Yule to be on 50. He's so great, such an interesting person, such a great player. I think that we saw a lot of his potential, especially too on 40 when he was on. But I also do understand where it's like if you're playing for one specific thing, like it's like if you're like, I'm playing only to raise awareness of this one thing, then it's like the reasons to come back might not be worth it for you, especially if you have different ways to go and advocate for the platform that you're passionate about.
That is very well put. Yeah, but I totally agree. I love Yule. Yule also seems like an absolutely incredible person.
Mm-hmm.
I had the chance to talk to him a lot during the course of Winners at
Yep.
War, and like just the way he was able to advocate for this and really use
Mm-hmm.
this opportunity at $2 million to instead say like, no, I need to highlight a cause that is very important
Yep.
to one of my friends. Is like so noble.
Oh, absolutely.
So listen, I'm happy we got Yule for a second chance. A third
Yes.
chance doesn't look like likely, unless did they pull Maryanne out of the CBS Viacom,
The Drag
subscription
Race
period?
All
Yes,
Stars?
yes. So
Don't
we
get me started on that. It's infuriating. No, I hate charity seasons. Yeah, this sounds so bad out of context, but like, I'm so sorry. We're gonna hijack this to then go and make it a Drag Race podcast. We're not doing charity seasons. Why are we doing charity seasons? Okay, I think charity is so important, but I think it's a disservice, especially if you're going and you're here performing for an art. It is a disservice to you, the player, to then be going and forced to go and return, and then all the other All Star seasons weren't charity, but this one is for some reason. So dumb. No, I know, and I love charity like other people. Okay, but there's certain places to have certain platforms, and an all-star season is just not it. Let the players choose what they want to do with the money, whether they need it for themselves or not. Don't make your season a gimmick. I'm so sorry. I just need to let that
no,
out.
please listen. This is our confession booth. You
Yeah,
haven't been on a podcast since you got married. This is the new
I
Maryanne.
know.
I
No.
I will also say Charity Seasons is a incredible drag queen name. Someone please take that if it
Yes.
hasn't already.
There we go. Yeah, I know. Sorry. So I that might get me some heat, but they just never hit us the same. It's like if you're going for charity, especially with Drag Race, you get some great fights. But if you're going for charity and you're now representing a charity, are you going to be going and talking about a 40-inch wig? Probably not.
Mhm. It's very true, especially on Survivor, yeah, where it's like, would you now listen, maybe you look at like the Celebrity Apprentice as an example of like people behaving badly in the pursuit of a greater cause, but I feel like for Survivor's sake, it's not necessarily something
Yeah.
that someone wants to do because they'll go back to their organization. They're like, I don't want your blood money.
Exactly. Yeah. So, TLDR, if you skip this, I support charities, but not charity seasons.
Well, let's move on then to our runner-up. I think this is going to be
Yes.
perhaps a bit more of a fruitful back and forth of a what if here.
Yes.
Ozzy has played
Mm-hmm.
4 times.
Yep.
And look, Game Changers was perhaps the most tamed Ozzy, even if
Yep.
his hair was the least tamed. I think famously Jeff Probst has said that he actually did not want Ozzy on, that he was overruled by CBS. I
Oh.
think he had probably felt that Ozzy had kind of like completed his loop,
Yeah.
as we've been saying in South Pacific, which
Yep.
I even agree with in retrospect. I think South Pacific, despite the fact that he doesn't finish as high as in Cook Islands, might
Yep.
be his best season in terms of
Yep.
just like pure character.
Yep.
Ozzy does come back. Jeff says he was wrong, even though Ozzy does have his probably most low key season, is super
Yep.
quiet, goes out in 12th place.
Yep.
So Ozzy has led a very interesting life in the interim
Yes.
since, and Ozzy does want to come back. He was on with
Yes.
Rob during Winners at War and says, hopefully I get the call back. He said in his quarantine questionnaire, like, what kind
Mm-hmm.
of question is that, when asked if I would come back.
Mm-hmm.
The question, honestly, and we'll get into a bit more specifics later about this because I know there are not a lot of people in the know, is would CBS have him back?
That's a good question, especially if you know about Ozzy's life. CBS likes very squeaky clean, and for the same reasons they didn't like Brian, and it's not the dog shooting, they might not like Ozzy. So that's the whole question there. And then it's also interesting where it's like Oz, especially when you get players who are like who've played in the first 20 seasons, they're like staples in the household names. That's how you got Kimmy back, even though she was pre-merged from Australian, like from Outback, because she's such a big name. And Ozzy is such a big name as well, too. So it's like, will that be overrid, especially because some people aren't chronically online and don't follow the players outside of what's in the game. And then the second thing, though, the counter argument, though, is that are there other Aussie type players that could take Aussie's role that we can then put instead of Aussie? And I think the answer to that is yes.
I think you might have played with one.
Exactly. We have Jonathan, who, same like Oz, great in the water, physically dominant. You have from 46, Hunter off the top of my head, also a physically dominant player. These are people who, of course, like instead of Ozzy, might be a little bit more palatable on the tongue to then go and choose instead of Ozzy. I'd love Ozzy. I'd love to see him back, but I just think that they have other Aussie types that they can pull from, which are less controversial.
All right, so I will be explicit about this, and explicit is probably the best term to describe it, because Ozzy more recently has become an OnlyFans content creator, and that
Yes.
doesn't necessarily mean going into the way that it's kind of usually regarded as, but I believe Ozzy has gone in that direction. I
Yes.
believe he's produced like full nudity content. He has starred in several, maybe even several pornographic films in the interim. Now,
Mhm.
to talk out of the other side of my mouth, Ozzy, I believe, also participated in activities adjacent to that, if not outright activities involving that, in between his Survivor appearances already. So
Mm.
it's not like it's something that did not disclude him
Okay.
in previous seasons. The question that I have is, and this is like a much larger talk about the meta narrative. To
Mhm.
your point, Maryanne, Jeff has marketed Survivor in the new era, especially, right? It's like, we know
Yes.
families watch this show. We make
Exactly.
it for the kids. So
Exactly.
even if they have turned the blind eye to Ozzy previously, and this is not to
Mhm.
judge his career choices
Yeah.
whatsoever, like sex work is work, but
Mhm.
do you think that there's a chance that something that could fly in terms of extracurricular activities, in a manner of speaking, back in 2006, 2008, may not in 2025?
Hmm. I think so, yeah. I think so, especially because the new era is really about building that younger fan base to make sure that Survivor's there for another 20 years, especially because it's a significantly smaller show than it was 20 years ago. So I do think that they're looking more into that, especially like, just based on personal reflection. they want to make sure that they don't want people who are just evil, and this is not saying
No
what
more
Ozzy is doing
villains.
is evil. I'm not trying to equate that, but what I'm trying to say is they're looking for people who are kind, friendly, easy to go and show to a child. So production might not go, and Jeff might not go and like what Ozzy is doing, especially bringing back to the fact that you do have Ozzy types in the new era that you can pick from rather than Ozzy. It might then be a detriment to him, because then Survivor might be like, we can't give this to a family, or like all these young players don't even know who Ozzy is, and we want to give them players that they want to go. Like, I really feel as if, this is an aside, but I really feel as if in season 50, one thing that I think production might be thinking about is building new legends for their audience, so that they have people that they want to watch 20 years later. And especially with the marketing of the new era being the new era, it kind of behooves them to have a more newer cast, like from the newer seasons, or it kind of just reduces exactly what the whole new era is. Because if you're hyping up Survivor's a new era, then you have a lot of people from older seasons. Then it's that you're now going against the marketing that you've done for the past 4 or 5 years at this point. So I think that's also something to keep in mind when looking at these players, because it's like then if they want to keep their new era marketing, you need to get very, very heavy hitters, and you also need to get fewer heavy hitters than you might not want to, which means that these past 30 seasons is going to be more competitive to get in only based on marketing.
So I completely agree with all that. To provide sort of a devil's advocate here, we talk about, there are plenty of types that could replace Ozzy. But Ozzy has that name recognition.
That's true.
This is a guy that is still talked about for years upon years. I think where Ozzy would stand the best chance of being cast, background aside, would be a Legend season, which is throughout this series, we have certainly talked about, especially these old school players under the guise of that. Because to your point, if we're looking at this realistically, there's a very slim chance that a lot of these old school players are going to get cast, especially like in bulk. But we want to have fun with this,
let's dream. I won't be thinking.
No, dreams is tomorrow. Dreams is tomorrow.
Oh, you're so right. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Gia. I'll let you happen.
But I think that it's definitely something that I still want to mull over the course of this podcast. And look, what I can also say is, like, if we are super conflicted about this, there'll be a couple more seasons we can talk about with Ozzy. So we could kick that can down the road for another conversation.
We'll make it someone's problem.
But I think you brought up some very good points, and I think either direction, where I think Ozzy is someone who wants to come back. And also what's interesting is that, like, Ozzy is not the same as he was. He told Rob, like, if I get the chance to come back, I obviously am in my 40s now. I believe he is heck of a number, 42. Maryanne. So he has come out as bisexual since playing as well. But if he can't climb those coconut trees, is that going to work as like a fun narrative? Or is that something that might also have producers being like, yeah, well, you're not going to come back and do the Ozzy thing. So, like, why do we want you here?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Is he going to be the new Superman in a fat suit?
That's the thing. We shall see. One thing I do want to shout out, Becky Lee, unfortunately, will not be in consideration, but I want to give her a quick shout out, because I do feel like, look, first 0-vote finalist in Survivor history, setting forward a precedent that even extends to today. I think she was a little underrated. I think the pair of her and Yul was super, super strong. And look, perhaps her and Sundra shined a bit more brightly in retrospect upon hearing what happened with Kenzie and Liz in the 26 Final Four fire making.
Yes. Same thing. Like, Yul has even given Becky her flowers as well too when speaking about the strategy. Becky did beat fire making, beat Sundra, so there's something with that as well too. So it's always about the beating, not about the time. So who knows? Yeah. I don't think Becky's a realistic one, especially, like, I think that her time has passed. If anything, her best chance was season 16 fans versus favorite. But I unfortunately do think that we're not going to see Becky in a future season.
Well, let us move into our jury and look at this big ass group, Maryanne. 9 people.
9 whole people? That's such a large jury.
Yes, exactly. Surely this will be the highest critical mass a jury will ever be in Survivor history. But
we can't do more than 9. Like, that's too much.
But working our way down, we have the aforementioned Sundra, we have Adam Gentry, we have Parvati, Jonathan Penner, Candace Woodcock Cody. We have Chop Him Up Like Poop himself, Nate Gonzalez. We have Jenny Guzan Bay, who unfortunately succumbed to the bottle twist where there was a surprise vote someone else out at tribal council twist. There was Rebecca Borman, who, unfortunately, given her edit, the last name kind of described what her legacy on Survivor was. And there was Brad, who I think is probably most well remembered for the time Cowboy alleviated his headache by putting a big old red mark on the center of his forehead. So I think we've got to concentrate, with no offense to the majority of this jury. We got to talk about the center three.
Yes.
Here, because
also very stacked boot list. Like that 3, like just very, very stacked.
Because these three are going to be, as I mentioned, multiple time returnees in the game. Where do we want to start here? Who do you want to start with?
Let's just go from Poverty onwards. Let's continue in the line that we've been going on.
Yeah, I guess we're going in order of like the times we most recently seen about them and talked about them.
Exactly.
So, Poverty, fresh off the Traitors, 4-time player, 1-time winner. Some should say should be a 2-time winner. Parvati has, of course, been recently seen in a turret in Scotland and has given some discrepant interviews with regards to her future on Survivor. She did tell Dalton Ross, she's like, nope, I'm not going to do it. There's going to be a big target on my back. At least in the Traitors, people wanted to play with me. No one wanted to play with me in Winners at War. It's going to be even worse this time around. However, in maybe the same press junket, she talked with TV Line, and she does have one exception. She says, every time people ask me this, I'm like, no, I don't want to go back and play Survivor. Look, I have a love-hate relationship with the game, and it's like an extended family for me. So it is like a sicko family reunion every time they ask me to come back. I kind of feel obligated to say yes, and also I would have really bad FOMO if I said no, because my friends are probably going to play. And then she goes on to talk about, like, well, I've made up with Sandra now on the Traitors, when we work together or apart, etc., etc. So it seems like, and we talked about this actually with Sandra, that there's that pinky, Maryanne, that Parvati has kind of closed the door, but the pinky is pretty much kind of the reason why Parvati would be on in the first place, which is like, if there's a Legends season, I can't say no to it.
And I see it. I think that 50, and I've talked with Omer about this, so I'm sorry, Omer. I'm not sure when you're doing your season, if it's before, if you've read them, but this.
No, you'll be the first. Don't worry.
Okay, perfect. So I'm stealing this from Omer because he'll get mad when he hears it. But it really behooved the 40s to have another season, like returnee season of predominantly 40s, so that season 50 you could have that mix of heavy hitters and that mix of also new legends to really go. So then when you have players like Poverty, they're like these players like Parvati and Yule and Ozzy, Jonathan, Candace, and even some more. They're not feeling like they're showing up at Game Changers and it's Sandra, 2-time winner, being voted off, and she's there with Sierra Dawn Thomas. No disrespect to SDT, but it's like, you know,
hey, that's fan favorite Game Changer. SDT,
fan favorite Game Changer SDT. I know, but it's the same. But it's the same thing. You know, it's like you have people who are coming with baggage and people who are coming with things to prove. And if you have someone who's coming with a thing to prove, you then might go and throw a challenge just to vote out of Poverty, which we saw on Game Changers. That's what Zeke and Sarah did. They threw the challenge just so they could say they could vote out Sarah. So it's like, if you're coming into the season knowing that it's like, well, I'm not going to win because people are going to tee-hee, giggle, vote me out. It's that love-hate. So I really think that it really depends with Poverty, where it's like, if she's putting feelers out to see who's getting calls and a lot of her friends are getting calls, then she might then go and return. But if it's like, oh, I hear that it's only 3 or 4 more of us, especially with that old school massacre we saw in 40, and how it's also very mentally draining to want to play with people and you get that shut door again and again, it might not be worth it.
Do you think there are legs to, because we've talked a number of times about like people like Jenna Maraska coming back and undergoing this big narrative, a lot of changes in her life. We'll maybe talk about that with the next person, and how there is potential to like, okay, we'll have them back to see how they are in this new form of themselves. Parvati, of course, came out in the past year, is in a very loving relationship with Mae Martin. Wasn't really talked about on the Traitors either or after the fact. Could that be a reason to bring her back if she wants to talk about what has happened in her life and sort of like this new awakening within herself that she wants to explore?
I think that's a reason, especially for Parvati, to bring it back. Like new relationship, like also new stage in life. She played the traders, especially, and one of her things was that she's like, I want to be a trader. I want to make money for my daughter. Divorce is expensive.
Mm.
And then then now in that part, she might be like, well, this is another way for me to go and get money. This is another way for me to go just like have like instead like the ending of the closing, because the last time I played, it's like, the last time I played, my ex was there on the show, and it's like now this time when I play, it's like I'm in this good headspace, I'm in this good place, and then however it happens, I know that I'm supported at home. So that could be a reason why she wants to come back. Like
Yeah.
I really do think it's like if Parvati, I think will only return if like she has another, like she knows she has like her Boston Rob or her
Yep.
Yule or
Yeah.
her, so that's how I see it.
I completely see that as well. And I think, if we'll talk about the list later on, like the reason would be to put her on would be under the assumption that she would have those
Exactly.
people.
Exact and the thing is she needs those people.
Yes. Yep.
It's just a fact. Like if you have people who are like these legend names, these name recognitions, you need to have enough of them who are also willing to work with each other, or we're just going to see another Survivor 40 old school massacre again.
Yeah, I think that, listen, there were a couple of close calls with Parvati. She was nearly first voted out of Micronesia. She was nearly
Yep.
first voted out of Heroes versus Villains. That
Yep.
prophecy might come true in a Survivor 50.
Yes. So she would need friends on that season.
Well, let's go from friends to one of Parvati's foes. Let's talk
Yep.
about Jonathan Penner. So it's so interesting because in retrospect, I would say that Jonathan Penner, much like Ozzy, had that 3-season closed loop
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
tragic that the man can never make it past seventh
Yep.
place, but obviously had a huge role to play in Cook Islands. Goes out in a pretty tragic fashion with a medevac in Micronesia, but then comes back and has a really large role to play
Yep.
in Philippines. I would say the returnee that I think has the most content in
Yes.
Philippines is Jonathan Penner, and like the image of him yelling Denise in the voting booth sarcastically, and
Mhm.
suck eggs and whistling the theme song on the way out, like
Yep.
it's such an incredible way for the iris to close on the story of Jonathan
Exactly.
Penner. However, Jonathan Penner has had an incredible amount of tragedy occurred in his life
Yes.
over the past 7 years. For those that are
Mhm.
not aware, we spoke about this with Yul a bit, but Jonathan's wife, Stacy, who did visit him in Cook Islands, in 2017 was diagnosed with ALS, was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a
Mhm.
neural degenerative disease. And unfortunately, it was just kind of a matter of Jonathan, caring for his wife
Yep.
as her faculties slowly degenerated
Yep.
and lost the capabilities. And that has kind of been how Jonathan had been spending a good 4 or 5 years
Mhm.
was just
Mhm.
caring for his wife when there was nothing to be done. That's the reason
Yep.
why Yule came for Winners of War. He wanted to raise money for research to find a
Yep.
cure to this. Sadly, Stacy Title passed away in 2021.
Mhm.
Jonathan has said before, I think it was in like a charity stream, he did say like, "Listen, I'll be the old guy on the season, but I'd be willing to come back." And
Mhm.
it was, I think, unfortunately, under the kind of like grave, inevitable circumstances where he's
Yeah.
like, "Listen, Stacy is going to eventually pass
Yeah.
from this, and then I'll sort of be able to do it." And so I think, and we'll talk about Maryanne, I think the capabilities of finding the resilience and strength
Mhm.
to do that. If he does, God, talk about an incredible narrative to bring
Mhm.
somebody back for
Exactly.
time number 4.
Yeah. I think that I think that Jonathan, out of everyone in this season, has like the highest 50 equity for me. Especially
Interesting.
like I think especially for when you see his 3-season arc, and then also the way that it ended, and his fatal flaw being not being willing to jump just a little bit, like just that one time being a little
Mhm.
bit hesitant to jump, and then seeing it return, and then also people love Jonathan. The people who've played with Jonathan, pet fans who love Jonathan, and Jonathan, even as a person, is one of like from the interactions I've seen with him, is like seems like such a great, wonderful person. In the moment of tragedy, didn't go and just let tragedy stop him from advocating for like not just Stacy, his wife, but also for other people who are going and experiencing ALS. Like I think that if Jonathan is willing and has the mind space and is in that place where he feels comfortable to go, I think that he's the no brainer where it's like he should get a call. He should get the opportunity. I really think that even being the old guy. We've seen old people play and kill it. Like
I mean, yeah, he'd be 62. Like that's
Mike
not
Mike
terrible.
was what, 58?
Yeah, exactly.
And like Mike was so dominant. Like so age really, you can still win immunities. You can still play strategy. I don't think that age is like a big massive factor if you're
Yeah,
a person.
I mean, if we're comparing people that are already on the ballot at this point, that's the same age as Gretchen. That's a
Yep.
year younger than Tina Wesson.
Yep.
That's like 2 years older than Rupert. So yeah, I think when it comes to that, like Jonathan certainly has his wits about him if you follow him on
Mhm.
social media. And like the fact
Yep.
of the matter is, not only one of the best voices
Yes.
from a pure flavor perspective, but one of the best narrators in Survivor
Yes.
history.
Absolutely. Like absolutely. I would love to see Jonathan back on my screen. But the same thing as Jonathan, if you have Jonathan on, you need to have friends with him. Like it just
Mm.
like a so just because it's like you have such this name recognition person.
Oh, interesting.
You need to have like I really think that you need to have friends with him, especially with people willing to play.
That's interesting because I would imagine that with Jonathan, it was maybe more so, especially I think with everything that happened with Stacey. Like, is
Mhm.
there more reverence there, and is there less so obviously of a big target on his back than someone like Parvati, where it's like, again, he never made it past 7th place in any of his seasons.
That's true. I think it's interesting. Let me think about that. Like I think with Jonathan, you're not gonna I think the thing with Jonathan is that, like, if there's a swap, that's where, like, the problem would be if he plays on 50. And I know this is supposed to be the wish list, and now we're talking about hypotheticals of,
Listen,
like,
we can
how
wish
he's
list
gonna
the seasonal
play.
structure after all this.
Yeah, yeah, if there's a swap, that's
Two
where his thing
tribes,
is.
no swaps.
Like, I think that's where his biggest hesitation would be if he plays in a swap. I think that if on his starting tribe, he would be fine. I think he'd be able to integrate very well, especially there'd be other bigger fish to fry in that moment. But I do think that, especially with who he is as a person, I think that the energy that he brings, energy is so important in Survivor.
Mm.
And I think that the energy that he brings in the situation will make it harder for people to see him as someone to be voted out first.
Well, and I think the energy you bring in is really what it comes down to as well, which is look, when Jonathan said that, his wife is still alive, Greg
Mhm.
might have been sort of already looking ahead to what the scenario is, but
Exactly.
there might be a difference between him saying that back in like 2021
Yeah.
and now coming in as somebody who like has gone through this
Yep.
tremendous loss. It could
Yep.
either fuel him or it
Yep.
could break him. And I'm
Exactly.
honestly not sure which it would be.
Yeah. I just think that it's really like for the wish list, it's very where is his mental space and will he be supported by production in that mental place because Survivor is mentally hard. So just like making sure that like are you going to be supported? Are you ready to go? And then if the answer is yes, then please begging on my knees.
All right. Well, let us talk about the last person. And I think Jonathan is
Mhm.
unfortunately sandwiched between like two of his greatest rivals here. Let's talk about his fellow mutineer in Candace. Now, if you made a list of all 3-time players in
Yep.
Survivor history, Candace would probably be the one that you'd forget, that you'd leave
Yes.
out of like, oh, wait, Candace played twice more because Candace, her story was that she was actually originally supposed to be on Fans versus
Yep.
Favorites, that she apparently got cut because she was going to med school and Parvati replaced her. So then she got called back again for Heroes versus Villains.
Mhm.
The story there was that she was supposed to be on the Villains tribe due to, of course, her mutinous actions in Cook Islands, but due to the fact that there was an alarming Micronesian contingent on the Heroes, was asked to swap last minute, and that's how we get Candace Woodcock Cody as one of the 5 greatest heroes in Survivor
Yep.
history. Even in Heroes versus Villains, I would say probably plays one of the more understated games just compared to everything
Yes.
going on around her, though she does memorably flip against the Heroes at the Amanda vote.
Mhm.
But then we get Blood versus Water, where she is brought in last minute.
Yep.
Last minute. You think Austin had little turnaround time to be on Survivor 45? Candace and John Cody got had to fly on a plane last minute to get there. Candace is unfairly voted off with this initial
Mhm.
like day one, basically vote out who you don't pregame with. And so she's immediately sent to Redemption Island,
Yep.
but she makes good on that chance as
Yep.
she produces maybe the stuff that people most remember about her besides the mutinying and the Adam
Yep.
starving her first
Brad
time.
Culpepper.
Brad Culpepper, she bit of a Mandela effect, was not the one who said F you
Nope.
Brad Culpepper. She's the one who flipped him off, but that
Yep.
attitude was certainly felt. What's interesting, Maryanne, is that according to Candace in an interview she did with Rob during Winners at War, we do know that before Winners at War was decided as a theme, there might have been some sort of like rival season brewing. Candace said that she was asked,
Oh,
apparently.
wow.
So the reason why I bring her up is because like production may have shown a bit more of a recent interest in her than we thought.
No, I think Candace makes sense to me, especially like you've seen her 3 times, so she has that recent memory in Blood versus Water, and especially the way that she went, where she off the bat like just dead on arrival, because it's like, oh, you weren't pre-gaming and you're not a strong big man, so I guess we'll just vote you out. Like, so it really was unfair for her in that beginning. I think that she's great. I think right now, like, her stage in life is different. She started playing when she was a interested pre-med, then she played again in medical school. Now she's a full attending an anesthesiologist, I think, right? Someone
I
fact
believe
check
so,
me.
yeah.
I think so. She's an anesthesiologist, has still happy husband, happy kids, different life. We love seeing the parents come back and play Survivor. Like, that's just something that Survivor loves. They love parents coming back and playing. I think that seeing Candace, this would be the perfect season 50, would be the perfect 4th time, right? You like, especially because as someone who never watched Survivor as a hero, I thought she was I think I'm the one person, and I'll be the one fan who I saw Candace on the Heroes Trap, and I'm like, this makes sense. Girl was sent to Exile Island every single time, and she took it like a champ.
Oh
okay?
my God, so, wow, you're the one! You're the one!
One who looked at it and said, this makes sense.
Wow. I love that. Listen, the Survivor community is vast in its opinion.
It is.
So
there's no right
judge.
opinion. I have been downvoted on Reddit, actually. I posted on Reddit when I watched it, and I'm like, I love how I'm like, I see why she's a hero, and everyone's like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, I am entitled to my opinion, and I'll hold it with my chest. Like, she was sent to exile there was no idol. Imagine being sent to exile and there's no idol there, and every single time. Penner went and Penner mutinied. Why didn't he go to exile? It was only Candace. Yeah, so I'm team Candace as a hero.
Wow. And so I do think that, yeah, I think in retrospect, if you're thinking like who's going to come back for a 4th time, I do think people would be like, really, Candace? But again, I have to look at the impression she left in Blood versus Water, and especially the fact that maybe it's just that the rumor mill is suckering me in, Maryanne, but like the fact that she did get a call for 40 seems to make me think that production has her in mind. She has expressed as well, I believe she said in her quarantine questionnaire, if the timing was right for my family, I think I would. And my kids are old enough that they would get a huge kick out of it. So I'd probably go and make them proud. And that's fun as well, right? Like this woman who was a big firecracker in 2 out of her 3 seasons, how has she changed now that she's a mother?
No, and the thing is, people forget, like, I'm going to emphasize this again. Survivor loves parents. Like, think about all the returnee seasons and do like the parent to not parent ratio, okay? So there so many parents on 40, so many parents on second chances. Game Changers, I think, is the smaller parent to not parent ratio. But in this like newer returnee seasons, especially when it's full, they love parents. Like they just love it. And especially with it being a family show, and you're having now, you want kids to watch, and you now have parents speaking about how they're doing this for their kids, how they want their kids to be proud of them. Don't sleep on the parents. Don't. I think the parent ratio, we're going to be looking at like at least minimum 40 to 60 parent to non-parent. That's my call.
So you think is there going to be some sort of quota for parents?
I think there's now a quota for parents. I think we're going to be seeing quite a few parents.
All right. So I would imagine, Maryanne, there probably isn't anyone else you want to call out here. I'll give a call out to Nate, who I think is a very fun character. I think he delivers some of the most underrated final words in Survivor history, where he calls Jonathan, I believe it was a wax stank fruitcake.
Yes, Nate, great. I think same thing, Nate would have done great on an early return season, but the door has closed, unfortunately, for him. His castmates always give him his flowers as people who they think deserve to return, but I just don't think 50 is where we're going to see him return.
All right, well, let us go through these first 8 boots, and we'll highlight a few people, even though justifiably, I don't think there's anyone that we're really going to put on here. But of course, we have in reverse finish order here, we have Seku Bunch, Billy Garcia, Cecilia, probably one of, unfortunately, the most unmemorable contestants in Survivor history. JP, I remember the volleyball player who had like epic eye rolls and who was blindsided by the women on his swap tribe. Stephanie Favor, who seemed like she went home because she said that she'd like to go eat some chicken and mashed potatoes.
Yes.
We have Cowboy playing one of the wildest Survivor characters, a guy who was able to ignite fire during a challenge by waving the kindling around, someone who created the original split vote plan and Plan Voodoo, which we could certainly get into in a bit. We have Christina, who was the police officer, and we have basically like wish list Courtney Merritt, which is Flicka, the roller derby girl.
The roller derby girl. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yep.
So I want to highlight a couple of characters here. And again, not to necessarily say, oh, we should bring them back, but I do think they should deserve their flowers, much like these players have been given these other people. I mean, come on, Cowboy. Like, Survivor Game Changers, this guy was the definition of it. For those who don't remember, Cowboy had a prophetic dream about going out to dinner one time and splitting the fee, I believe, between a bunch of credit cards. And that made him come to the realization, okay, if we suspect that one of Jonathan or Candace has the hidden immunity idol, because remember, this was what was known as the Tyler Perry idol, where you don't play it before the votes. If you get the most votes, it's automatically used up. And then the person with the second most votes goes home. So he basically says, if we split our votes between Jonathan and Candace, basically if we do 4-3 to 2, then one of them is guaranteed to go home. Either the person we put the primary votes on is outright voted out, or if they have the idol, then the person with the second most votes goes. And it's kind of for that reason that Yul ends up turning on him. And it's like, oh, wait, there's actually more to this guy than we may think. And he ends up getting voted out. But really, an incredible character. I think certainly brought an interesting flavor, considering that he was, I believe, a Vietnamese immigrant as well. Someone that was a bit more of an outsider in terms of personality. One of the only people in Survivor history, Maryanne, to accidentally discover the other side's camp.
That's I'm thinking about that because, production can't speak to the player. So imagine like they're just like, should we stop? Like, do we stop them? Like, do we not stop him? Are we allowed to say something? And I guess they just said, let it happen.
Yeah. So I just want to, again, acknowledge him here, just because he is such a fun pre-merge character and someone who I think deserves his due for as much as we've talked about the big brains being able to engineer like an instrumental part of Survivor like the split vote. It all started with this guy.
Yep. Just he told it to the wrong person.
And lastly, I need to talk about one of Survivor's earliest memes, which was Billy Garcia. Like, justice for Billy. I think there is some objectively funny stuff about like I'm not gonna find $1 million, but I did find love. Her name is Candace. The very missed communications between these two on the mat where Candace says, "We all love you" to Billy, and he takes it to be oh, you mean you love me singularly. Produces one of Jeff Probst's best tribal reactions with a little double take. I do feel bad because it's like very clear that not only was he a dead man walking as indicated by the skull on his shirt, but like now he kind of gets kicked on the way up by being told, yeah, even this prospect you had in your mind was to say it was a reach would be an understatement.
Like poor Billy. Like it was great, especially because didn't they throw the challenge to get Billy out? They
did, yes. Ozzy threw the challenge to get Billy out.
Ozzy threw, and like I think that's always the worst feeling, where it's like it's not even that like we had to vote you out; it's that we wanted to vote you out so bad that we threw the challenge to make sure you would go home. Like, ooh, so. And love Billy. He was great. I got a lot of my inspiration from Billy with Zach. I thought it was perfect. So I just think he's great. He was the blueprint.
Yes. And also, listen, he was also maybe the blueprint for maybe some of the musical stylings in 46, considering that he said in his final words that he should have been on the Metal Tribe.
Yep. We had a rock band player on 46, made it all the way to the end for Billy. This is all for Billy, people.
Billy's tale is long over the course of Survivor, especially in the new era. I feel like this is the Billy Garcia renaissance.
It really is. He's getting his flowers finally. People are understanding how monumental Billy is.
All right. Well, Maryanne, it's time for us to give the flowers.
Yes.
Now, we got a big old bouquet here.
Of course.
Now, this is interesting because, to be candid, I feel like of the players that are going to be up for debate are ones that could feasibly be discussed for future seasons as well. So, I would say that, like, let's not come out of here necessarily feeling like we're forced to do it if we feel a certain way. But is there anybody that you feel very good about putting on?
Easy. I think, like I said, Penner for me has to be on. Like Penner, just the great 3-season arc, a lot of different life change, such a great energy. Everybody loves him. Jeff loves him. One of the best narrators to ever be on the show. I think that for 50, like he needs to be on if he wants to be on.
I would agree with that. And I think that, I even found a tweet of his from like February where asked if he would play, he would say maybe. And so, like,
Mhm.
I had a question about post 2021, what would his mood be? And listen,
Yeah.
it's not like a guaranteed yes,
Yep.
but maybe is better than no.
Yes. It's instead of a pinky, it's actually a foot.
I will put Parvati on this list as
Okay.
well. I think maybe it's because I've already put someone like Sandra on
Yeah.
this list, and so it's like I can't necessarily have one without the other. I do
Yep.
agree that I think that Parvati is going to have a lot of ifs, a lot of stuff in her writer, if you will, as to
Yep.
whether she would actually say yes. But if we're kind of really doing a catch-all of what a season 50 theme would be, and they do
Exactly.
Legends, it would be hard pressed not to have Parvati at least consider time number 5.
Okay. Then on that case, I'm actually going to go close off that trio and put Candace on. I think
Yeah.
especially knowing that production has their eyes on Candace and also knowing like production loves parents, like they love parents. I really think that if Candace wants to go on, I really think that that's one of the people who is going to have a call, someone who's interesting. People kind of know her, and especially because of how dirty she was done on Blood versus Water, it could be that, okay, here's your final one, and whatever happens, happens.
I would agree with that as well. And also to know, Parvati and Candace are both 41. That's just sort of the advantage as well of this era of
Mm-hmm.
Survivor, where they were casting a lot of young people on the show.
Yep.
Is we're not necessarily dealing with the first 7 seasons where we're like, okay, which 60-plus-year-old person are we bringing back? We're able to focus on people that have maybe a bit more of an age
Yep.
where they won't be impeded by the physical
Yep.
circumstances. I'm wondering if we should put a pin in Ozzy. I feel like unless you really have a huge indicator one way or the other, I'm not sure what to think at this moment.
You know what? I say I say his name recognition is good enough that we can bring him back. Like
Okay.
there's a lot of things, a lot of controversy that people might think with Ozzy, but I do think if CBS overrode Jeff once and he changed his mind, it could happen again.
Okay. We can put Ozzy on there. So basically, perhaps in one of the more predictable versions of these podcasts, Maryanne, the people we walk away from are the very ones that have played Survivor multiple times. But I
There
think
we go.
we're all kind of coming in under this assumption that like these people would come back if there was some sort of
Yes.
like legends
Yep.
quote unquote season. And
Yep.
so these might be some of the people most unlikely to show up if season 50 does not go with that theme. But
Ye-
again, since the theming is so vague,
Yep.
I think that, we could go forward with it. All right. So there we go. We have emerged with a hearty quartet, 1/5 of the cast of Cook Islands is
Mhm.
moving on to our short list. Ozzy, Parvati, Jonathan, and Candace. Tomorrow, so much for our dreams. We mentioned it before, Survivor Fiji. And Maryanne, oh my God, you must be such a psychic because you predicted the guest for Survivor Fiji. Of
What?
course, we cannot talk about Survivor Fiji without talking about perhaps its number one fan, at least from my perspective, in the form of Gia
Yep.
Worthy. And it'll be really interesting, especially considering the fact that, Fiji is, especially compared to Cook Islands, which is very well remembered, I would say, between the I2
Mhm.
story and, again, the top heaviness and how many people have come back.
Mhm.
Fiji, the exact opposite. The cast looks similar, honestly, in terms of ethnic
Yep.
makeup, something that we can maybe get into, but it's been a season that has largely been disregarded. Only
Yep.
one returnee from it that we'll talk about
Yeah.
Earl kind of having a close call here. I'm intrigued from your perspective. Who would you want to add on to a short list from Fiji?
Oh my gosh. Earl. And I think that's it. But,
Mm,
I'm not the Fiji expert and there might be other perspectives that I haven't thought of. But I think that Earl, same thing, like you said, with the close call, I think that he would be one of the coolest people to come back.
all right. Well, Maryanne, this was such an incredible time. I'm so honored and Jervis that you were the first podcast to come on
Thank
after your
you.
momentous wedding, of course, an on-air belated congratulations to
Thank
you. It looked like an amazing day,
you.
and you killed it. Absolutely. And we only went a little bit over time, and you were able to squeeze in an entire diatribe about how much you hate the
I
dirty season.
know. I know. It's like a 2-for-1 podcast there. So, if you only count the time that had to do with Survivor, we're under.
There we go. What would you like to plug, Maryanne? Anything social-wise, podcast-wise, etc.?
Oh my gosh. I don't really have anything to plug right now. I'm joking around. I'm living my very good Nara Smith traditional wife. So after this, I'm obviously going to go and cook dinner for my husband as a wife should do.
Oh, good. I see you've been
So,
listening to Harrison Butker recently.
yes, he was so inspiring. No, I have nothing to do, just nothing to plug. Just playing video games, just doing some Baldur's Gate 3, some Stardew, but nothing to plug. Just be kind to one another, as Julie Chen Moonves says.
Oh, yeah, and Big Brother season is right around the corner, so thanks
Mm-hmm.
for warming us up for that.
There
Well,
you go.
tomorrow we'll be back with another podcast covering Survivor Fiji with Gia Worthy. Of course, let us know your thoughts in the comments as well. I know that you do, and thank you all so much for the support you've given to this so far. This has been such a fun process, and this podcast with Maryanne has been no
Mm-hmm.
different. Until tomorrow, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.